Hey everybody, Chase and Peter here with the Buying Tampa Bay podcast. Today we're going to tackle a common issue that many sellers run into when trying to sell a house, and that's navigating the inspection period. It's a moment that every seller dreads. You have a contract to sell your home, but there's an inspection period. Your realtor tells you that you're not out of the woods until you get past the inspection period because almost anything can happen during that period of time. It's the time in which the buyer can basically back out of the deal for any reason. You've got an inspector coming in to uncover all kinds of things in your home that could be potential issues. And you've got to wait around for that inspection report to come in to see if they're going to try and negotiate for repairs to be done. It's a real stressor and a difficult period of time for every seller. So today we're going to talk about how you as a seller might be able to better navigate through this period of time. And so let's start out with the basics, right? So Peter, what is an inspection period?
Oh man, I'm getting like palpitations just hearing you describe that process because it's so common, and I have like all kinds of shared anxiety for my clients and for myself whenever this period starts, right? I mean, it's pretty much the period of time, right, from the point that you have a contract, right? I mean, it can almost happen at any moment where the buyer's agent's going to send over a request that an inspector can come and start probing around in your house. And the inspection period is a period of time from the point that a contract is executed, and it's usually negotiated within the standard language of the contract, up to 10, maybe even 15 days in some extreme cases, where the buyer can come and examine just about anything they want to examine in your home. And depending on the actual language used in the contract, they have the right to back out of the contract or renegotiate the deal based upon their findings. So it's a really vulnerable time. You know, and it's one of those things, Chase, because you go into a contract and everyone's so happy when you have an inked contract and signatures, but really they've got to hold on celebrating until this inspection period is done. And at the very least, this inspection period is done. Probably also the financing contingencies that, you don't know about until practically the time you're going to close, right? But all of these things can upend a contract process, and they're super stressful. And buyers and sellers just need to know how to negotiate these processes once they come.
That's right. It's never a done deal until you sit at the closing table and you get the check, right? I mean, that's really the moral of every transaction story. But this period of time is that first hurdle that you got to get over, right? You've negotiated, you've agreed to terms on a contract. Now you've got this period of time where there's a lot of uncertainty. And so we think about, inspectors coming into our home, like what kinds of things are they looking for? What kind of inspections would a buyer typically perform during this time?
So the most basic one is the standard home inspection, right? So there are all kinds of home inspectors out there that are going to do a general, readily observable defect inspection on your house. And they're going to come through and they're going to really examine all the major mechanical systems, the AC systems. They're going to look at roofing, electrical, plumbing, and then just a general health of the house inspection. That's your biggest one. But you can also have a termite inspection during this course of time, or a wood destroying organism inspection, as it's referred to. You can have a 4-point and a wind mitigation inspection, which sometimes are a part of the basic inspection and are sometimes something different. You can have a radon gas inspection here in Florida too, which is crazy, but in the contract, because someone some long time ago had lots of problem with radon, and so their attorneys built that into the contract, and here it is, standard language now. So those are the basic ones, but you could have even more than that. A buyer is entitled to have a special mold inspection if they want to have one. They're entitled to have all kinds of special atmospheric or environmental inspections that they might want to have. They just got to get all of that done within that inspection time frame at the front end of the agreement. And then based upon that, they can renegotiate almost anything.
Yeah, one important thing to remember is that not only do they have to get these inspections completed within the inspection period, but they've got to receive these reports back from all of these specialty inspectors that they use, specialists for different areas, and then submit to you as the seller or to your agent an addendum requesting what they want fixed, replaced, repaired, whatever, right? And so there's a lot to be done in this usually a very tight time window.
Yeah, that's a great point, Chase. And here's a good common sense thing just to remember based upon that. How hard is it these days to get a good cost estimate on anything? And it's both difficult and it takes a lot of time because our contractors, our vendors are majorly tied up. So let's just talk about the financial scenarios that have to break down, or the steps that have to happen in order for, within a 15-day inspection window or even less, for a buyer to come back with an ask for the seller. They've got to nail down what needs to be done. They've got to, well, first of all, do the full inspection, then nail down the list of what needs to be done, then get an idea of what it is going to cost to fix that item if there is a cost associated with it. And I will assure you that is not being done as rigorously as it ought to be done. They're probably spitballing a cost of what it most commonly costs us to address certain items in the property, and you are open to all kinds of abuse because of how hard it is to nail down the cost of repairs. And so within that short period of time, they're going to come back to you with a very high, in all likelihood, estimate of repairs, of what needs to be done, because they have to do that in order to make that 15-day negotiated time limit. It's a really kind of perverse incentive for them to rush it. And many of us fall prey to that by being asked for high repair concessions at the end of an inspection period.
Yeah, and so given this tight timeline, typically what I see with my buyers is that they're going to do 3 inspections. 2 are at the behest of their insurance company to try and get them the best possible policy premium for their insurance. And 1 is that general home inspection, right? And when we're talking about general home inspection, you've got a licensed home inspector that comes out to the property and just generally inspects the functions and the systems in the home, right? You're going to look at AC, plumbing, electrical, the roof, the structure, windows and doors, GFCI outlets, all that kind of stuff that you'll see in a common general home inspection, right? Then the wind mitigation inspection is really designed for the insurance policy application. It's designed to tell the insurance company, hey, has this home been built up to hurricane code here in Florida, right? Does it have the appropriate length of nails, the right decking, the right attachments of the trusses to the house, the right type of shingles, the right type of windows and doors and all that good stuff, right? Anything that wind or a wind storm is going to impact on the home is what that inspection looks at. And then you've got this dreaded 4-point, right? The 4-point inspection has become the critical inspection for most sellers because the 4-point covers the roof, the plumbing, the electrical, and the structure. And it's designed by the insurance company to make sure that they understand what the risk is that they're insuring for this home. If your home does not pass a 4-point inspection, you can't get insurance. If you can't get insurance, you can't get financing. Can't get financing, the deal is done, right? And so those are the big 3. But the one that seems to always be the one people are most concerned about is the 4-point, and specifically, will my roof pass the 4-point?
Yeah, that's right. So the 4-point is fundamentally the most important and the most cost potential attached to it as well for the seller. Because if a 4-point inspector comes back and says that a roof is past its useful life, then there's a major cost obligation being placed on the seller before they can sell that home. And they cannot negotiate in most cases that item away because the home is effectively uninsurable. Now we'll talk more about whether or not that's a true statement to make, that the roof is truly past its useful life. But it's definitely the boogeyman of inspections that everyone wants to watch out for, is that 4-point. But I will tell you, all the other inspection items are presented with every bit of the level of importance as that 4-point. And a very good buyer's realtor is going to come with guns blazing after that inspection report. He's going to document all the deficiencies of the house, every popped nail in the drywall, every piece of tile that's loose on a shower enclosure, a toilet that might jiggle on its base, an outlet that's not working. They're going to go through every item, and they're going to the inspector themselves will highlight in orange or in red on the report the items that look shady and look suspect. And that realtor is going to demand that every single one of those items be fixed. That is the art of the deal, right? Because not every one of those items has to be fixed. And understanding which of those have to be fixed and which do not is a critical point for sellers to be aware of in this process.
Yeah, and so in a seller's market, what we do is we put an as-is requirement out there, right? We say, hey, it's a seller's market. We're going to have multiple offers. We're not fixing anything unless it fails the 4-point. You know, that's typically how you can go. That's the power you have as a seller if it's a full-blown seller's market, right? We've transitioned a little bit out of that full-blown seller's market into a little bit more of a buyer's market here recently, right? And so some of these negotiations have come more into play in recent months than they have over the past couple of years, where people were willing to pay over appraisal and didn't care if anything got fixed, right? As long as it passed a 4-point.
Yeah, right. I mean, and that's certainly what was going on just a couple of short months ago. People were, accepting or willing to accept whatever kind of condition the home might be in. Now, as we transition into a buyer's market, there's certainly more power the buyer has to demand that items be fixed. But folks must be aware in this process, and I'm approaching this. I want to approach these comments more from the perspective of the seller, because as a buyer's agent, I'm going to be as aggressive as I can and demand as much as possible be fixed, because I don't want to pay for it once I own the house. But as a seller, what we must be aware of is the psychology of the buyer. We all are very aware right now, there's almost nothing for sale on the housing market. And so if you found a house that you like, and you've gone through the hassle of the time spent on putting a contract on that property and viewing it and kicking its tires and all the showings, and you and your spouse are emotionally committed to that house, which you are, whether or not the deal is closed, and then you've paid serious money for a home inspection, and you discover problems, your inclination is going to be, of course, to demand that those be fixed. But boy, that buyer is committed. They've made some real commitments, and the seller must recognize that they have that negotiating leverage right there, that no buyer who's done that much diligence in a purchase process is going to just walk away from a deal unless there's a huge or insurmountable number of repairs in their eyes. So do keep that in mind. The seller has real power even in a buyer's market.
Yeah. And so let's go back a little bit more to the technical side, maybe, and let's talk about, okay, when we're looking at how to pass a 4-point specifically, and again, the 4-point items are also going to be included in that general home inspection a lot of times. They're just not on that specific 4-point inspection form the insurance company looks for. But when we talk about a roof, right, I mean, we're looking for, issues like cracked, broken, missing shingles. We're looking for granule loss on asphalt shingles. Maybe if you've got a barrel tile roof, we're looking for cracked tiles. We're looking for membrane issues. We're looking for, on flat roofs, we're looking for standing and pooling water. We're looking for cracks in the seams on a roof like that. And really, overall, they're looking for evidence of leaks or things that are potentially going to cause a leak, as well as trying to evaluate how much life does this roof really have left in it before it needs to be replaced, which is a very subjective thing, I might add. And so are these issues. I mean, like the fact that there are cracked, broken, or missing shingles, that's a fact. They can document that with a photo. But is that really a severe condition that's causing this roof to fail an inspection? That's what you got to consider.
Right, because the answer is maybe, right? And it's also maybe not. But every inspector, and goodness, every insurance company right now is going to take the ultra conservative path. And they're going to say that roof has a diminished useful life remaining because I see all that stuff on it. And oh, by the way, let's not forget, they're also looking for errors or deficiencies in workmanship when the roof was first installed, because a roof that was installed 20 years ago, you don't know the quality of the vendor that did the work back then, and maybe they're not as good as maybe they just weren't that good, right? And they did a kind of a crummy job on the roof install. So highly subjective, but we're still in a case where the inspector holds a lot of the cards, and they can force you through the language they use in that agreement to spend a lot of money on repairing a roof if they determine that it doesn't have a lot of life left.
Yeah. And so, I mean, the roof's a big component. Obviously, if they say the roof's bad and it's old, and even if it's maybe got some leaks in it, that's a huge cost you're going to have to outlay and replace before, or at least repair, if not replace, before you can close this deal. But this inspector is also looking at like electrical systems, right? So you've got to make sure you've got GFCI outlets in your wet areas that are properly functioning. You can't have aluminum wiring typically. That's become a big issue through houses because of the fire danger that the insurance companies say it poses. You've got to have a breaker panel that's got, up-to-date breakers in it, like a, Square D, General Electric. There's several brands that they look for. You can't have open wire splices, could cause a fire. And you can't have ungrounded outlets, right? Gone are the days where you could buy a home from the 1950s with a two-prong outlet everywhere with no ground wire. Like, they don't like that. That's a potential hazard, right? So electrical stuff is also a big deal and may not cost you like a roof will cost you, but still, you can spend several $1,000s fixing electrical issues as well.
Great points, all. And let's not forget things like double taps, right? Some well-intentioned prior owner comes through and does a small remodel and there's not a free breaker, so they double tap a breaker, and that's not permitted either. Some of those are very cheap things to remedy, but some are not. Some are very costly. And let's add to that the fact that find a good electrician right now, see if they'll come out and give you an estimate to fix that. The amount of time it takes to get that done, that's not easy. And so if you're a buyer and you're doing that, you're going to ask around your friends, you're going to ask your realtor, you're going to get an estimate for a worst case scenario of what it costs. And that's what you're going to demand, either that kind of cost concession or that kind of repair from the seller. So big deals.
Yeah. And on that point, maybe we'll touch on this a little bit more, but that's why so often we see these addendums for repairs come back and they're not asking for money. They just want it all fixed because they have no idea what it's going to cost. And they want to put all of that burden on the seller to find the vendors, pay it in full, and provide evidence that a licensed contractor fixed this stuff, right? They don't want to have to deal with it. They just kind of dump it on the seller. When, in fact, there are some times if you're in a more powerful position as a buyer, maybe it's better for you to negotiate for a dollar amount or a credit at closing if it fits within your loan parameters and it won't cause any red flags with the underwriter or the insurance company.
Great points. Great points. That inspector is also looking for plumbing issues, right? I mean, they're looking for polybutylene pipes. They're looking for old clay pipes. They're looking for obvious deficiencies in the structure of the plumbing. Plumbing is one of those things that, almost everyone's a part-time plumber, and you open up a sink and you look under there and you see the craziest things, right? All kinds of flexi bend pipes attached to the P-traps and all kinds of, it's been knocked and bumped over the years and it's like sprayed with Flex Seal. I mean, they're looking for all these kind of things as they assess the plumbing systems to make sure that this plumbing system has been both well maintained and was constructed, well constructed to begin with. And if they determine that we have leaks, they see any leaks, these are all things that must be fixed as a part of the contract process.
Yeah, and then that last element is the structural element, right? So in the structural element, they're looking for things like, well, did somebody put an addition on the back of this house and not properly put in a stem wall foundation? Or did they not attach it correctly to the home? Are there oversized cracks, in the foundation or in the blocking, along the sides of the home, especially at like door jambs and window sills, things like that, things that would be outsized, settlement issues, enough to where you can put your pinky through the hole, basically, in Florida here. But they're looking for stuff like that, looking for poor construction standards, looking for, these DIY home additions or remodels that weren't done up to code, right? They're looking for some of that stuff too. And, who doesn't have a DIY project somewhere in their home or attached to their home, right?
All right, a little too much caulk, a little extra speckling here or there, right? Something that you decided to shove in there and then ignore. They're all over, and all the well-intentioned people, and man, contractors can be the worst. So if your client was a builder, I guarantee they've got some of these, or the seller was a builder, I guarantee they've got some of those in their house. Right? These are things that those inspectors are going to look extra close for, and then they're also going to look for some just general items that are good health safety items to be aware of, such as the insulation levels in your home. They're going to assess, do we have insulation, and is it overly compacted if you do? And they're going to look for things like evidence of peeling paint or evidence of lead-based paint or things that might indicate that we've got moisture problems in the house. They'll look for water lines that might have been at one time inside of your garage from some kind of leak that might have come in at a various point in time. And all of these are going to be, and they'll also do some moisture checks and drywall, just looking for, what are the moisture levels like and what are the environmental conditions of this house? All of these things are very valuable things to know. And as a buyer, I'm going to want to know every single one of them. And I want to suggest this. As a seller, you intuitively know every single one of them already. Now, there might be some things that you just like are going to be totally shocked by when that inspection report comes in. But in most cases, you are not. You're going to know these problems. And so we really need to talk before this podcast is over about the right way to handle that that knowledge. You have it. What can you do to preempt some of the difficult negotiations that you're going to deal with if this is the first time you're taking action on these repairs in your house? You're going to be held over a barrel if this is your first time, and no one likes to do things at a gunpoint like this.
You know, it's like because most people become so good at living with stuff, right? It's like, you know, yeah, there may be 3 bottles of Flex Seal on the floor around the base of the toilet to stop it from leaking, but you know, it's not leaking anymore, so we're living with it, right? You know, who cares that the wax ring's totally eroded and it rocks back and forth a little bit, but you know, it doesn't leak, so we're fine, right? You just learn to live with this stuff, right? Because then it's scary. You get this long list, right, of all kinds of stuff, and you feel offended, right? Like, hey, who are you to tell me that my house is a piece of junk? You know, you came in here and you're telling me all this stuff's wrong. Well, do you really want to buy it or not, right?
Right.
And it leaves the seller asking the question. So, hey, what's my obligation here? What do I have to do? You know, do I have to do all this stuff? Do I not? What's required of me as the seller?
Yeah, these are great questions. And no one wants to be put in a situation where they're having to decide those things, you know, as I mentioned earlier, at gunpoint, right? So do yourself a favor, seller, and maintain your house. I mean, I know that's easier said than done. I have a list of things that I like. I can't believe it took me 4 months to put the toilet paper holder back on the wall again. But the reason why it took me 4 months was because the drywall was compromised. And I knew it was. I had like patched it too much before, you know, with all the use, it was coming off. And I needed to like do a kind of a significant drywall patch job and probably locate some studs behind there and attach the toilet paper holder to the studs and maybe even move it to the other side of the wall and then retexture it and paint it. And I had to do all of that. And it like took me 4 months to get it done, but it's done. Right. And that's the problem. And now I don't have this long list of things that someone's going to demand be done, or they're going to be distractions in a negotiation for the sale of my home. All of these rocky toilets, this extra Flex Steel, these are distractions. They make buyers think you're hiding something because you haven't done things correctly. So you must do yourself a favor. You must get ahead of these a long time before you go to sell your house. And don't put off till tomorrow what you can do today.
Yeah, just another little small piece of advice is if you are looking to sell a home, most of the time your real estate agent, your listing agent has a relationship with a home inspector. And they probably give that home inspector quite a bit of business with all the buyers that they have coming through their office. And those home inspectors are often willing to do a pre-listing inspection for you, you know, where they'll come through your house in a very general way and point out some of this stuff to you that may not be as obvious as, you know, a toilet paper holder not on the wall. You know, they can check your GFIs for you. They can do a couple real minor things to help you get ahead of the curve on this, right? So that when that list of repair requests comes back, you've handled the obvious stuff and it doesn't look like you're as derelict as the list might indicate.
Yeah, good advice. You know, so what we know is that, you know, because some of these things it's not like you're being a procrastinator by not repairing the roof that might have 5 years, but might have 10 years of useful life left. You're somewhat of a victim to the home inspector at that point. But when the home inspector comes back in and they say that these 4-point items need to be repaired, plumbing, mechanical, structural, or roofing, then you are generally obliged to repairing those items. The items that come back in that say, please fix this loose tile, those are far more open to negotiation. And we'll touch on what that means at the end. But Chase, tell me what we can do, because I know there's been several scenarios that you personally have experienced with lately where a 4-point has failed an item. And then the seller has had to respond to that, but's been able to effectively respond without selling the farm.
Yeah, you know, most recently I had a roof issue, which is very interesting. We had a roof that was 16 years old. And so, you know, not totally at the end of its useful life, but, you know, getting there, maybe 2/3 of the way there based on current standards for materials that are used on roofs today. And the 4-point inspection performed by the buyer failed initially. And it failed for things like cracked shingles, some granule loss, and a couple other minor, issues on the roof. But the way it was worded in the report and the way that it came back from the buyer's agent to me and my seller was, this roof is toast. It's got to be replaced. Get a bid now. Get it replaced ASAP so we can close, right? So what do? We go out. We're waiting on these reports to come back so we can actually see the photos. But in the meantime, we go get a roof quote. It's $14,000, right? This is like a 1,500 square foot home, $14,000 roof. That's on the low side. I mean, a lot of roofs now are bumping up there to 20,000 plus, right? But $14,000 is deal impacting, right? That's a big, big deal. And so putting that $14,000 roof on doesn't mean now that the buyer is going to pay you another $14,000 for the home over what you negotiated for the price, right? That'd be nice if they would, but most of the time that's not happening. And it also doesn't increase the value of your home necessarily by $14,000 either on the appraisal, right? So in this situation, after we got the reports back and we had our $14,000 new roof bid in our hand, we looked at the photos from the inspector, sent out one of our roofer contractors to kind of check out what the repair scenario might be. And really, it wasn't as big a deal as the report was making it out to be. We spent $1,500 repairing one section of the hip on the roof on the back side of the house. And we replaced the ridge cap shingles. We replaced a few squares of shingles on either side that had some granule loss. And voila, we're able to now pass a 4-point inspection. So not 14 grand, we spent $1,500 and brought that roof back to where it still had 7 years of useful life remaining according to the inspector. So big win for the seller in this. Maybe didn't make the buyer that happy, but based on the terms of our contract, we were not obligated to replace that roof. We're only obligated to pass the 4-point inspection, which we did.
So in order to do that, Chase, I assume you had to have the inspector come back out and verify that this home had indeed more than 5 years of useful life remaining.
Yeah, in fact, it's interesting because the contracts don't stipulate who's allowed to get that inspection done or who's supposed to perform that inspection. So instead of bringing the guy back out that made a big deal out of this and kind of blew the deal up for a day or two, I brought my own 4-point inspector out. And again, he's a guy that I work with, but not tied to me in any way, truly a third party. He came out, did his own assessment with his own photos, which he's accountable for in peer review and review from the insurance company. So it's not like it's totally an arm's length inspection, if you will. And he signed off on it with 7 years of life left with those necessary repairs having been made.
So that brings up a very important point, I think. I mean, not all inspectors are created equal. And like you said, they are certainly accountable to peer review and to professional development, and they have a professional license to maintain. But you've got some inspectors who are just alarmists about things. And there is interpretation that these evaluations are open to. So without a doubt, I see different levels of alarm being sounded about all kinds of repairs from different kinds of inspectors. And sometimes I feel like, wow, that inspector passed something and he did it generously because I think it's far less useful life remaining. And sometimes it's the opposite extreme. So let's make sure that you're not subjecting yourself to an alarmist inspector, and find one that's balanced in all of this. That's what you want. You want to present the balanced truth of the matter and not be either too conservative or too alarmist.
One good piece of advice that I'll give here, and this actually came from the guy that I typically use to do my 4-point inspections, is that if you do have a roof that is, 5, 7, 10, 12 years old, however old it is, and it's discolored, whether that's because of dirt, whether it's because of acid dripping from oak trees on your roof, whatever the case might be, whatever builds up residue on your shingle, before you go to sell your home, it's a good idea to hire someone to come soft to wash it. Okay, you don't want to pressure wash it, a bad idea, right? But they have these soft washes now that many people publicize, and they work. They make your roof look brand new. from a visual perspective. And so that will go a long way if you spend, $400, $500, $600 getting your roof soft washed. That'll go a long way toward you being able to pass your initial 4-point inspection.
That's sounds like washing a car before you sell it to me. That's a smart thing to do. Well, so let's hit on a couple of these things that we can do to get ahead of the negotiation process for non-mandated items. So the general items that come up, right? One of the things I think is very important is for, your realtor is going to have some expertise there in this whole situation as far as how to negotiate these types of items. But many realtors you'll find are going to not have some of the construction knowledge that you might have. They might also be a little weak on some of this step in negotiation, because what we find here is that many people just demand that these items be completed, and realtors kind of cave to that demand. And so it's probably very important to have that conversation before you take any contracts at all with your realtor of what kinds of repairs you're going to take seriously and that you're going to repair, and what things you're not going to repair, right? Make those statements, have that discussion with your realtor very carefully upfront, and maybe even build those items into your listing. Make your listing to such an effect that you understand that there are loose tiles on the shower wall and you do not intend to make that repair, period, right? Then when that inspection report comes back, they'll of course note the loose tiles in the shower wall. The buyer will see them when they're going through the house, but they will know based upon your disclosure that you do not intend to make that repair. Now, they can still ask you to make that repair, but it's much easier if you've already disclosed the item and you've already disclosed your negotiating position for you to say, no, I'm not going to do it per my listing. So just a thought there.
Yeah, this is where it becomes very important that you hire a realtor that has some experience and knowledge with what it costs to fix stuff like this, because you may not have a lot of time during this process to figure this out. Some of it you can do preemptively, but we've got a lot of general experience rehabbing homes. We know what stuff costs to fix. We know the best way to fix it, the most efficient way to do it. And if you have that knowledge to be able to advise your client, you can help save them a lot of money sometimes. Usually when I get a laundry list of items like this that I consider cosmetic back from a buyer in a request, I kind of do a ballpark estimate for the seller and I say, look, it's not worth your time. We've got 2 weeks till closing, right? It's not worth our time and effort to get a contractor out here to fix all this stuff. Let's offer them $1,500. Let's offer them $2,000, whatever it is, comparable to what the list looks like. Let's offer them just enough money so that they think it's enough to pay for this stuff after they move in, right? But let's not overdo it, right? And let's not spend our time and our money getting it all fixed, because in the process of fixing it, sometimes that uncovers even more stuff that needs to be done. So that's typically just personally my strategy that I try to pitch to my seller and try to negotiate with the buyer's agent.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, but do keep in mind too that, like, if you got a home that's lovely and has got a lot of great things going for it, you might have someone come in and request a large list of cosmetic items. It's perfectly fine to say, no, not going to fix these items. My home's in wonderful shape generally. You're not buying a brand new home. Fix your own tile, right? Once you buy the house, right? And I know that sounds aggressive and you're afraid they'll walk away, but you've got to imagine that they're as eager to buy this house as you are to sell it, and aren't going to walk away over a small amount of money when they know they can live with it or do it themselves or get it done cheaply too. So, but it's a great point. Know the cost of these items preemptively and know what these items are, right? We've already said, get your own home inspection. We've already said, try to understand completely what the scope of potential repairs are at your house. Do not do it to yourself where you're going to be blindsided by this inspection report. It's a mistake, and it's a completely self-inflicted wound, because you don't have to be ignorant as to what your house needs from an inspection standpoint. So make sure you know.
Yeah, that's right. And one other thing too, I try to do typically for my sellers is when an offer comes in below asking price, when we're doing the negotiation as far as what the terms and the price are going to be on the home, and the buyer's pushing hard to get the price down, sometimes I'll go to the seller and say, hey, look, they're way down here on price. If you're good with that, let's go to them and say, look, we're not going to do anything to this house. Okay, we'll take your price, but it's as is. So no upfront, we're not repairing anything. Okay, for that price. If you want to put repairs in, bump the price back up. Similar to what you were saying before, but I think what you said is very important. Do it up front. Let the agent know at the time they submit the offer that, hey, look, we're not doing anything. So give us your best offer. We'll take a look at your inspections. We'll make sure we pass the 4-point, but we're not doing this nickel and dime stuff at that price.
Yeah, surprise always works to the advantage of the buyer, because either we're hiding something and they're not going to trust you, or now they've got the upper hand in negotiations. Do not be surprised in a sale. You don't have to. And so disclose as much as you possibly can. If you get an inspection report, you can even disclose that report. Save the buyers some hassle. Make them feel like this is the most transparent seller I've ever worked with, and they're showing me everything that's wrong with the house, and they're telling me they're not going to fix it, right? But I know, and now I know when I'm buying the house that that's what I'm dealing with, and so it just makes the whole situation so much less confrontational, and it removes surprise as an element from negotiations.
Yeah, and so if you're out there and you're looking to sell a home, when you're interviewing real estate agents, maybe ask them what their experience is in dealing with repairs, how much knowledge they have. Have they remodeled a home before? Do they have vendors and contractors that they routinely work with? Do they have inspectors that they work with all the time that can do favors for them, like pre-listing inspections? All these things are very important for you as a seller, because you're about to spend a lot of money hiring a professional to help you sell your home. And having that knowledge is what they're expected to have, and what you should expect them to have when you're paying them that kind of money to help you with this process.
I think it's hands down the most important knowledge bank that your realtor can have. And this has to be right, or else you're going to risk losing a deal and losing a lot of money in the process. So, hey, HomeProp realtors do a really good job of this. I'm going to give a plug for them. Allow them to help you get ahead of these problems in your selling transaction. Or if you're using them as a buyer's agent, that's real good too, because, hey, they know how the other side thinks, and that's going to be really helpful to you in the long term.
All right, that's a wrap. Hopefully this has been helpful to you. If you're out there looking to buy or sell a home, remember, homeprop.com.
There you go, Chase. It's been a blast. Until next time.